Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow. It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to a new episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts of Big Play Sports, Jack McCurry. How are you doing today, Jack?
Doing well. 1 week from today, man, we are going to be celebrating our first season opening win since 2004. It's hard to believe the all season has come and gone, and it's we're in game week now.
Yeah, I can't believe we're finally to this point. It's been a very, very, very long off season with a lot of nonsensical talking points, and I'm just glad that this week we finally get to discuss real football. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about all the roster cuts, some of the moves that they made. They made a couple trades. They claimed a couple players. So we'll break down everything that went on with the roster cut situation and look at how the final roster kind of shook out. I think we're going to start with one move that is extremely puzzling to everybody, but as some more details have leaked out, it makes a little bit more sense. Earlier today, Field Yates of ESPN reported that the Browns have cut Greg Robinson. Obviously, everybody looked at, well, does this mean they're trading for Trent Williams? What does this mean? How are we going to go into week one with questions at left tackle again like we did last year? And as time went on, more details leaked out. Tom Pelissero said the Browns intend to re-sign him. By all accounts, it looks like this was a move to keep or to put Drew Forbes on the IR designated to return list. As long as you put on IR after the 53-man is set, then you're able to put on that designated to return list. So they cut Robinson, kept Drew Forbes. Now they're going to place Forbes on IR and re-sign Robinson probably tomorrow or Tuesday. Jack, when you look at this entire situation, how big of a gamble is it to take cutting your starting left tackle in order to preserve a move like this?
I don't think it's a big gamble at all. I mean, I think we can all say with no uncertainty that Greg Robinson's not desired around the National Football League. And when you look at it, the Browns did this because it was the cheapest way to preserve Drew Forbes, who they are clearly high on and are hopeful that he can make a contribution, whether it's later this season when he comes back from injury or down the road. He made big strides from day one of camp all the way up until his injury Thursday night against Detroit. So I think they're clearly high on him. They didn't want to lose his rights. And in order to do it, they cut Robinson. And, you know, this will be a story that'll just get swept under the rug because Robinson will get re-signed on Monday and we'll move forward. He'll be our left tackle at least for this year. And we'll see how it goes. I'm not too worried. I don't think this is a Carlos Boozer situation, much like people were comparing it on social media. Robinson will be here, and that's that.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way to get Drew Forbes on that designated to return list. He did go down with an injury in that last preseason game. It's not too serious, but he won't be ready for a few weeks. So getting him on that designated to return list down the road could be beneficial for the Browns. Hopefully, all the rest of the linemen stay healthy and, they don't need him. I think he's a player that they're very high on. And maybe next year he's someone that could maybe contribute as a starter. A couple of other moves that they made that we'll discuss before getting to the big roster cuts is the Browns claimed 3 players off of waivers. Linebacker Malik Jefferson, who was the 2018 third-round pick of the Bengals last year. Ricky Seals-Jones, who's a wide receiver converted to tight end for the Arizona Cardinals. And wide receiver KhaDarel Hodge, who is with the Los Angeles Rams. Obviously, the Rams have a plethora of wide receivers, so there's always going to be somebody on their cut list. Jack, when you look at these 3 players, who do you think could have the most impact for the Browns?
I would say Ricky Seals-Jones, because when you look at how our offensive line has played, it hasn't been pretty. And we've been looking for that third tight end who essentially could be the blocking tight end to replace Darren Fells. I think Ricky Seals-Jones can do just that. He had a high grade on Pro Football Focus for pass blocking, but I've seen some people say that it was in limited production. So, that stat could be misleading, definitely. But I do think he could be the one that would essentially make the biggest impact, because if he can help Greg Robinson or Chris Hubbard in the pass protection to keep Baker Mayfield upright, then it's going to bode well for the Browns offense going forward. I think Malik Jefferson could definitely help in special teams, and KhaDarel Hodge, he'll definitely be more of a special teams guy. He was productive in the preseason, albeit around a ton of talent at the wide receiver position for the Rams, but all in all, I would definitely say Ricky Seals-Jones will make the biggest impact out of those 3 waiver claims.
Yeah, I think Seals-Jones is the leader in the clubhouse in terms of potentially making an impact for the Browns. Being a wide receiver, converting to tight end, he could have the ability to make some plays in the passing game. We'll see how they decide to use him. Obviously, you still have David Njoku, Demetrius Harris, and Pharaoh Brown ahead of him. I'm not sure how much longer Pharaoh Brown is going to be here, but those are going to be your 3 tight ends, or 4 tight ends for the Browns this year, at least for right now. Malik Jefferson got pretty decent reviews in terms of special teams. So, it's always nice to have those kind of players on special teams. They did release Ray Armstrong, who was pretty good on special teams, so hopefully Malik Jefferson can fill that role. KhaDarel Hodge, I'm not entirely sure where he's going to fit in with this Browns team. It must just be on special teams, but you already have a crowded wide receiver room, and he's probably only biding his time until Antonio Callaway comes back from suspension. So it'll be interesting to see how these 3 players fare for the Browns. I'm not sure the plan is to keep them here long term, but hopefully one or if not all of them can make an impact for the Browns as we move forward. The Browns also made a couple of trades. They acquired Taywan Taylor, a wide receiver from the Tennessee Titans, and they also acquired Justin McCray, a guard from the Green Bay Packers. Jack, when you look at these 2 players that they acquired via trade, what sense do you get of the kind of impact that they'll make for the Browns?
Well, first of all, shout out to the Orange and Brown Report, because they reported on Friday afternoon, evening, that the Browns were interested in Taywan Taylor going all the way back into the beginning of the offseason. And, they were looking for another wide receiver, clearly, behind what they already had in Beckham, Higgins, and Landry. Taywan Taylor was productive down in Tennessee, albeit behind a bad quarterback play by Marcus Mariota, and being overshadowed by other guys on the offense like Derrick Henry, Corey Davis, among others. But he's definitely productive. He is a speedster guy. He's a guy who can go downfield, stretch the field much like a Beckham or a Higgins. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him. I've seen people say, he's primarily a slot guy. 84% of his snaps were on the outside. And I'm interested to see what they are going to do. Maybe they rotate Higgins and Taylor on the outside opposite Beckham, because we all know Jarvis Landry is going to be primarily the slot receiver on this team. So I think Taylor's really going to help. McCray I find very interesting. Obviously, the Green Bay connection. So you have that Dorsey, Elliott Wolf, Alonzo Highsmith connection there with Green Bay. You look at his numbers through Pro Football Focus. He gave up 5 sacks last year, 15 hurries, 21 pressures. So the talent must be there, and the offensive line coach, James Campen, who came from Green Bay, clearly saw something in McCray, and I'm sure the front office had a say in it as well for the Browns to make a move like this. And they also picked up Wyatt Teller prior to the 4th preseason game. So clearly Dorsey knew that the offensive line needed some depth, needed some talent. So he went out and got some. And, it just shows that Dorsey's going to be aggressive in finding people to fit on this roster, because he knows that with all the talent that's on this Browns roster, we're in win now mode, not just for this year, but for down the road. So he's not going to leave a stone unturned if he can find talent that'll add to this team.
Absolutely. And, when you look at all the talent that he's added to this team over the last couple of years, it's just a laundry list of players, and even some of the under-the-radar moves, like a Devereaux Lawrence, who has made an impact this preseason and looks to make an impact as we move towards the regular season. Some of those moves, like I said, went under the radar, and hopefully those can pay off as we get into the season here. Depth moves are something the Browns were definitely looking to do this offseason. Last year they were able to piece together quality starters at pretty much every position, but they lacked the depth when some players got hurt. So I'm glad to see that we're at a point to where when we're talking about these roster spots 45 to 53, that these are hard decisions. And when those are hard decisions, you have a really good football team. When you're able to sacrifice or have to sacrifice some of the depth that you have, you got a good thing going for you. And I'm glad to see we're finally at that point, because, the last 20 years, the cupboard has been pretty bare in terms of a talented roster. So I'm glad we're at the point to where we can contend for the playoffs, and hopefully we can do it for multiple years based on the different talent that we have.
Absolutely, and the fact that we have an aggressive front office that is willing to make moves for the betterment of the team, not just for the immediate, but also for the future. And, to see what Dorsey has done in a little less than 2 years to go from 0-16 to a potential Super Bowl contender, it just shows that not only do we have this young nucleus of talent, but we also have an aggressive front office that's not afraid to take chances on players or making bold moves for the betterment of the team.
All right, when you look at the overall 53-man roster as it sits right now, and we'll include Greg Robinson in there because they expect to re-sign him. Hopefully that's not an issue. As you look at this 53-man roster, Jack, where do you see this roster going? How do you like it set up? Is it too heavy on one side or the other? What's your overall takeaway from this roster at this point?
It's about as what I expected. I mean, I did miss on some of my 53-man roster predictions, but I'm sure no one out there had the perfect one, whether they want to say they did or didn't. But, when I look at it, I think it's about as expected. I mean, we knew that there was going to be 3 quarterbacks on the roster, even though some people didn't want 3 quarterbacks. The running back situation, Chubb, Hilliard, and D'Ernest Johnson, that's about what everybody expected, the wide receiver room. Although I would say Derek Willis probably should have made the roster over Damian Ratley, but I get that Dorsey's going to keep his guys. I mean, every GM does that. They keep their guys on the roster. Willis made the practice squad, so, glad that the Browns were able to hold on to him. Tight end, I see Pharaoh Brown. I'm surprised he's on the roster. Maybe in 24 hours he won't be. My biggest concern overall is the offensive line, because when you go back and you watch that Tampa game, they were shaky. And outside of Bitonio and Treader, I mean, there's a lot of question marks along that offensive line. Now, like we stated just a couple minutes ago, Dorsey was aggressive, went out and added some depth, but you just got to hope that, they were hiding stuff in that Tampa game, and that Kitchens is going to pull out the quick passing attack that they had in the second half of the year, and Baker's able to get the ball out quickly. because if he doesn't, then it's not going to be the magical season everybody's expecting it to be, because if that offensive line can't give Baker time, or if Baker can't get that ball out quickly, it's going to be a disaster. But all in all, when I look at this roster, it's about what I expected. And, I'm just ready for this season to get started, because the amount of talent on this roster, there is no excuse that the Browns should not be competing in not only the AFC North, but in the AFC in general by the end of the season.
Yeah, one of the points we haven't discussed, and I think we'll talk about it on our preview episode of the NFL, is the Andrew Luck thing, and how that impacts the Browns potentially making the playoffs and making a deep run in the playoffs. We'll talk about that down the road, but this Browns team is certainly able to compete right now. At least everybody expects it to be. On paper, they certainly look that way as well. So there's definitely an opportunity for this roster to be special and bring some special football back to Cleveland, something we haven't had here in many, many years. And I think we're all excited, especially me, who was lucky enough to get season tickets before they sold out, to go down there and watch 8 games of good football, and hopefully throughout the season they're able to consistently put forth that kind of product on the field. Jack, looking at the O-line specifically, they did bring in Wyatt Teller at right guard. They have Eric Kush, who started there over Austin Corbett. Who do you see starting week 1, and do you think that Teller will be able to push Kush out of that spot and start week 1?
Friday, Freddie Kitchens said Eric Kush is our right guard as we speak. That leads me to think that they're going to let Wyatt Teller come in this week and get his shot at right guard. They may even let Justin McCray get his shot, because he has experience at right guard as well. I would like to think, because of the continuity, that right now they'll go with Eric Kush. But if it comes down to Friday or whatever, or Sunday at kickoff, and Wyatt Teller rolls out there with the first team, I wouldn't be shocked, because when you look at what he did in Buffalo during the second half of the year last year, when he only allowed, I think, 1 pressure per game, and that's as a late-round rookie getting thrust into an offensive line, that's pretty good, and that shows that he's got upside. So if they think that Teller's the better option, get him out there, because that dude looks like a mauler, looks like a guy that wants to get better, and that's getting better. And when I seen Eric Kush getting, manhandled for the most part by Ndamukong Suh, which isn't a surprising thing, because that's what Ndamukong Suh does, it makes me think that he might not be as good as, Pro Football Focus said he was when the Browns signed him back in March.
Yeah, I think he could definitely push Eric Kush out of that spot for the first week. Hopefully it's a long-term solution to our right guard position, and it costs us, it was a 5th and 6th round pick, right? Or was it 6th and 7th?
No, it was a 5th and a 6th, and we got a 7th back.
Okay. I knew there was a 7 in there somewhere. But anyway, if you're able to solve your right guard position for that low of compensation for the near future, credit to John Dorsey. I think he still has 3 years left on his rookie deal. So hopefully that gives him a fair shakeout, and it's an inexpensive option for a team who in a couple years will have some hard decisions to make in terms of the salary cap. But we're not going to dive deep into that at this point. This is way too early to do that. But this offensive line has a lot to prove, I think, and I think it's the unit on this Browns roster that has the most to prove. It obviously has the biggest questions, the most questions. So hopefully this unit is able to give Baker the time that he needs. And to me, the running game didn't look as great in the preseason either, and that's where they're really going to have to step up, because the Browns want to run the football. You have 2 dynamic running backs, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So running the football is going to be just as important to them. And this offensive line has to be a cohesive unit in order to get to that point. If they're not able to, the passing game is only going to suffer from that. So hopefully this O-line can put it together and protect Baker and open up some holes in the running game. Jack, when you look at this defense, after all the cuts and after all the different moves that were made, what do you see as their overall impact and what they can do this season on defense?
Well, it all starts up front, and as we see in the Tampa game, that defensive front is going to come at offensive lines and quarterbacks with a fury. And the fact that they got depth behind that first team defensive line just makes it feel so much better. We've seen what Devereaux Lawrence can do in the preseason. Granted, it was behind backup offensive lines, but he was dominant. 4 sacks. I think he had 11 pressures. This is everything we hoped that defensive tackle spot would be in terms of the depth. Yeah. Chris Smith, we know what he can be. Jannard Avery had a fantastic rookie year. He's going to be in packages, and, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in first-team packages where he's coming off the edge, either alongside Garrett or Vernon. And then Equale made some plays, and, Chad Thomas, he hasn't shown anything, but much like Damian Ratley, we knew he was going to make the roster because that's the front office's guy, and they get the edge over people, unfortunately. I was disappointed Anthony Zello didn't make the team because I thought, obviously he was better than some guys like Chad Thomas, but unfortunately it's a numbers game. With the secondary, I think they're going to benefit a lot. The fact that Greedy Williams doesn't have to come in and play right away, he could sit behind Mitchell and Ward, I think is going to make him better. The only thing I'm worried about is the depth at safety behind Randall, because outside of Randall, none of these guys, Burnett, Whitehead, Murray, and Redwine, really flashed anything during the preseason. So that's my biggest concern on the defense. But all in all, I feel quite confident that this defense could be a top 10, top 5 defense in the NFL this year. It's just the safety position is the most concerning, but I feel like with a strong pass rush, which we have, I think it'll clean up any potential flaws that are in the secondary or the linebacker position.
Yeah, I don't know if this defense has to be that. I don't think they have to be a top 5 defense. I don't think they have to be a top 10 defense, because when you look at the offense and the firepower that they potentially possess, you're going to be putting up a lot of points. The defense just has to get you from point A to point B and be efficient. I don't think they have to be, like I said, a top 10 defense. Maybe if they're a top half of the league, so a top 16, I think that's more than enough to make the playoffs. And at that point, it'll be interesting matchups based on the teams that are left. But I think that there's really not a lot of pressure on the defense, and I think that's going to be beneficial to what is still a pretty young defense when you look at Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, Ogunjobi, some of the other guys on that defense. They're still pretty young, so when the pressure is off, I think that this defense is still going to perform. I'm curious to see how they're able to keep some of the various passing attacks that they'll face at bay as we go throughout the season. What the new defensive coordinator Steve Wilks is going to do to combat that. But as we get deeper into the regular season, I think that this defense is really going to gel together and show that they're a really good unit. And I think this defense is going to prove that they're kind of underrated going into this year. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do, and it definitely should be. It definitely should have a huge impact on the way the season turns out. Like I said, I don't think they have to be a top 10, but as long as they're efficient throughout the rest of the season, they'll be all right in that aspect. All right, as we kind of wrap up here, we wanted to look at some of the cuts that they made and talk about some of the more notable ones. And I think the maybe the most notable one is that the Browns decided to keep the Scottish Hammer over Britton Colquitt. They did also keep Austin Seibert over Greg Joseph. So, Jack, as we go into the season here, week 1, the Browns have a rookie kicker and a rookie punter. Is that a recipe for success, or is there disaster looming on the other side of this?
Well, you hope it's a recipe for success. I forget which national media person it was. I think it was Andrew Siciliano. And he was like, you mean to tell me a team that has playoff and potential Super Bowl aspirations is rolling with a rookie punter who has never really held before outside of camp and preseason, and they're also going with a rookie kicker? I think it's very bold. And, I thought they would keep Colquitt. I predicted that they'd keep Gillian over him, but I didn't really think they'd do it. But we'll see how it plays out. One scenario I heard was that, maybe they have Gillian be the long-range kicker. We've seen in camp that he can kick 50, even 60, and I think he even hit one from like 67. So if Siebert can't get the long-range kicks in, maybe they go with Gillian in that scenario, but then who do you have holding for him in that scenario? So it's all just a hypothetical. I just think this is really bold, and it can either lead us to a playoff appearance and maybe even farther than that, or it's all going to blow up in our faces and we're going to be scouring for a kicker or maybe even a punter by like week 4 or 5 because it's an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, hopefully it's not a disaster and they're able to have quality seasons. I think Siebert, it's going to take me forever to pronounce his name correctly, but I think Siebert definitely showed some flashes in the preseason of what he can be. Hopefully he can keep it together throughout the entire regular season. I think that neon shoe that he was wearing has some kind of magical powers in it because it seemed to solve some of his problems. So we'll see how it turns out. Like you said, hopefully it's not a disaster because that could definitely spell disaster to our playoff chances down the road. Looking at some of the other notable cuts, a fan favorite, Damian Sheehy Giuseppe was cut, as well as a couple others. Jack, when you look at the other cuts that were made, did any really shock you much, or were they about what you expected?
It was about what I expected. I was hoping, and it sounded like leading up to before the cuts that Seth Duval was going to make the team, whether as the third or fourth tight end or maybe even a fullback. But I think it was clear that, the Browns had their concerns about his durability. And, maybe he just needed a fresh start somewhere else. He was the only player that got cut that got picked up on waiver claims. He went to Jacksonville. So, that was the only other one. Everybody else, we kind of knew, hey, these guys definitely aren't making the team. Hopefully they come back on the practice squad. But there really was no big surprises. Colquitt was. He's going to Minnesota, so he landed in a great spot. And, of course, the Valve's going to Jacksonville, so that's another potential playoff team. But none of the other ones were really shocking.
Yeah, for sure. You could make an argument just about for everybody that was cut. I was shocked to see Trevon Coley got cut, but I thought he was somebody that played well last year, played well in the preseason this year, but he just got caught up in a numbers game. Same for a couple other players as well, kind of like Braxton Miller. But it's a hard business, and like I said earlier in the episode, when you're debating those last few spots on the roster, you're in a good place. And I think this Browns team is in a very good place to have some good success this season, give us some really quality football, some exciting football, and we're on to the Tennessee Titans. We got a week until that game, and hopefully 7 days from now we're celebrating our first win, and we're well on the road to potentially making the postseason for the first time since 2002. Jack, before we get out of here, did I miss anything?
You did, because right when we started recording, we got a mailbag question.
Well, that's not my fault. I did not know that. That was not in our prepared stuff. So go ahead and lay out the mailbag question, and we'll cover that and get it on out here.
All right. Well, shout out to Terrence Randolph at BigTown_Brown on Twitter. He hosts the Absolute 10 and 6 podcast over on Dogs by Nature. So shout out to Terrence. He put O-line outside of Bitonio. Which one is worse? 1999, which was the expansion team, or 2019? Now, I had to go back and look up the 1999 offensive line because, first of all, it's been 20 years. Some of us forget. So I went back and looked it up, and it was...
Not to mention I was only 8 years old then.
Yeah,
that's kind of relevant.
And I was 6 going on 7. So, but the offensive line in 1999 was Lomas Brown, Jim Pine, Dave Wallaba, Scott Rayberg, and Orlando Brown. Now, he said take Bitonio out, but, I mean, we're going to go ahead and call it for what it is. Would you rather have that offensive line, or would you rather have Greg Robinson, Bitonio, Treader, let's say Eric Kush, and Chris Hubbard? So would you go 99 or 2019?
Based on what we saw last year, and based on the quarterback play that we have, I'm okay with this line. I think Baker could make almost any O-line work. I think Treader is extremely talented, and he's someone that they need to get an extension worked out immediately. He needs to be on this football team long term. Obviously, you have Joe Bitonio in there. Chris Hubbard, gets a bad rap, but I would say he's average at best. And when you look at the pace that Tim Couch got killed that first year, I don't think this 2019 Browns O-line is going to give up near as many pressures as that one did back in 1999. So I would have to say that clearly this current one is much better, and I would rather have this one than that one. Plus, if Tim Couch had this offensive line 20 years ago, I think that things in history would be a lot different.
I definitely agree. I mean, I went back and looked. Lomas Brown was a 7-time Pro Bowler, and he was on the backside of his career at that point. Everybody else wasn't that good. Orlando Brown was okay, but he wasn't anything spectacular. And, of course, he didn't last that whole season. We had the incident with the penalty flag. But, yeah, like you said, Tim Couch got killed because of that offensive line and, ruined his reputation across the league. But, us in Cleveland get it, and he's actually now become a beloved Brown again. But, yeah, I'd take 2019 just because of what we've seen out of them last year and the fact that Baker's able to get the ball out quickly and the offense is designed around that. So I'm definitely going 2019 over 99 as well.
If you had to put a sack number on Baker Mayfield this year, how many times he would be sacked? What number would you put that at?
I will go, we'll say 20. We'll say 30. 30. I was going to say 25, but I'll go 30. So that's 2 a game?
Yeah, so almost 2 a game.
Yeah.
Just for reference, Tim Couch was sacked 56 times in 15 games in 1999. So I think that this whole line is much better than that one, and I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely.
As we get on here, Jack, go ahead and promote what you got, and if you want to tease what we got coming up this week, you can go ahead and do that too.
As always, follow me on Twitter at jmccurrycle. Check out bigplay.com. I am the Saints beat writer over there, and also have a lot of content across the sports landscape. Wrote about Justin Verlander's no-hitter. Wrote about Justin Fields' debut with Ohio State, so go check those out. As for this week, we're obviously going to preview the upcoming season. We're going to preview this week's game against the Titans. I'm sure we'll have some other stuff as well, previewing not only the Browns season, but across the NFL. The entire NFL will make our predictions as to who's going to win the Super Bowl, what the Browns record's going to be. So definitely stay tuned to the 1085 Gridiron podcast. And Anthony will tell you where you can find that podcast.
As always, first I'll tell you where you can find me. You can find me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, Joki. You can find the podcast on Twitter and on Facebook at 1085 Gridiron. Be sure to follow the podcast on those platforms. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Play. We absolutely appreciate all of you guys that listen to us every week. We may not be the best Browns podcast, but I think we do a pretty good job, and we really want to thank you guys for listening to us for the past 2 years, and this is going on year 3. It's funny. Our podcast has kind of taken a path of, year 1 was really rough. Year 2, a little bit better. Year 3, we expect to see a huge jump, and that's kind of what you expect from like a rookie draft pick. So we're kind of following that same path. So hopefully we're able to continue to improve, put out better content for you guys, and we got a lot coming for you this season. We're pretty excited for all the different content that we're going to be putting out there, and we got some good football coming our way, and I think that's what we're most excited about. We'll definitely be back multiple times this week. Be sure to keep your ears out for that one, and most importantly, as we get on out of here, go Browns.